Just a minute. Oh, that's why my mileage is going up. I've been riding a tailwind this whole time. Surprise! Coming around. And here we go. You don't have to like it. I'm coming over. Windy. All right. Oh, back on the road. Okay, I got my first. That'll work. This is I-94 in Michigan, eastbound, on the western side of the state, heading towards Detroit. And they're gone. Try again. Pretty lights. A while here. There's got to be somebody bored out of their skull. 2 minutes in, and it doesn't appear there is, but there's got to be somebody out there. Nice with a view winery. Oh, that's a cute name. So is this a tailwind or a crosswind now? Okay, there we go. Sorry, I had to respond to a text. Quick recap of what happened this last weekend. I got stuck sitting for 3 days between Kansas City. What does that mean? Trying to say Depeche Mode? So anyway, I got a load. They had that big computer thing that happened on Monday where all the computer systems went down. Well, that affected our company. I didn't know that. And all morning on Monday, we didn't get any loads. And all of a sudden, the customer started calling directly going, hey, are you guys not, responding to our email? And that's when they found out nobody was getting an email. So I got a load Monday afternoon, picked up at 2, drove direct from middle of Illinois to North Carolina, and I actually dropped my load at like 4 in the morning, direct. And I went back on the app, and I was number 4 of 4 for our company, which means I'm not going to get bothered. Yeah, that didn't work out. I woke up at 6, and I don't know how that happened, but I got a load coming back to Illinois. So I was running on about an hour and a half of sleep. And I picked up a load and turned around and came back up here to the western outskirts of Chicago. And I got up here at midnight last night, and the place I was dropping at wasn't there. It was a little company, they weren't open at night. So I holed up at a truck stop, and I got about 6.5 hours of sleep. Good God Almighty, that was hard. Anyway, I dropped off that load, Central England. Oh, hey, right on. This weather should look familiar. Overcast, cloudy, a little bit of rain, mist. And I dropped off at 7-something, and 7:30 in the morning, went back to the truck stop, and I was going to get out my computer, go sit down, charge up, do stuff, and the phone starts ringing, and they got me a load going to the town of Romulus, Michigan, which is just southwest of Detroit. So I drove just down the street from where I was sitting, picked up a 30-pound box, literally. It's in the back of the van, and we are now on 94 West in Michigan, going eastbound. This is running parallel. It's an east-west road, runs parallel to I-80, which is the toll road. Nice day. Yep, the weather ain't exactly the same. Yeah, it's been wet and windy and rainy. I'm getting bumped around. If you're watching, I'm getting knocked around a little bit. But I had a tailwind there for a while. I was actually getting really good mileage. I'm still at 25 miles per gallon, though, which is awesome for this day. So that's a recap. Last weekend was 3 days of sitting around doing nothing. That was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just stuck, and I hate that, especially being out on the road. But since then, we're blowing and going. So this is day of this week, starting for Monday morning. This is my third load, and I'll be in there by 4 o'clock this afternoon. And the Detroit-Toledo corridor is the mecca of cargo for this type of work, expediting. And it's going to be picking up a load is instantaneous. I have been number 17 on the list, and gotten a load really quick. And I've done a run between Toledo and Detroit. That particular route was 90 miles, and I was doing round trips. A company down in Toledo was manufacturing whatever the product was, and they would put a crate full, and I would shoot straight up to Detroit, drop it, and go straight back. And by the time I got back, they had another cargo, another pallet, and I just went back and forth all night long. I mean, so I'm going right to the mecca of expediting cargo, which is wonderful. But the thing that's going through my head right now is about the assembly line. And again, I'm a big-time World War II buff. I read every book there was to read, and now going down the road, I listen to documentaries, and I kind of get into the nitty-gritty. One of the things that I was listening to earlier, I kind of absorbed and adapted it with some other stuff I had learned about over the years, and that is the assembly line. Back in the good old days, if you were manufacturing a product, you made it by hand, basically. And then along comes the Industrial Revolution, which speeds the process up. But generally speaking, it requires a skilled person to make a product. And then in early turn of the century, last century, Henry Ford came up with the idea of the assembly line. And how an assembly line works, hold on a second. Hold on 1 second. Westbound, we got Highway Patrol, the immediate marker 8.6 watching. And sorry, I had to make that call. How old is too old to get a class license? I'm 59 and no legal record interest. Well, technically what I'm doing is called expediting, and it doesn't require a CDL, and you're not too old to get a CDL. You're never too old to get a CDL. I'm running on a basic driver's license, even though I do have a CDL. As long as your vehicle is under 10,000 pounds, you are outside of the CDL rules, which is a wonderful, another one. Which is a wonderful way to do this job, because I don't go through weigh stations, I don't go through commercial vehicle checkpoints, I don't keep logbooks, and I don't have any trouble parking. That's another advantage. I can always find parking. But if you're getting into driving, expediting, expediting's where it's at. Over truck driving, this is my opinion, and I don't mind doing this. And the operational costs are a lot less, especially if you're running your own vehicle, which I am, which I really like. But anyway, to bounce back, how an assembly line works, instead of having a skilled person or a skilled team building a product, you train an unskilled person to do one aspect of the job, repetitive. And if you train one person to do X, and then one person to do Y, and one person to Z, you can actually pretty quickly have a skilled team. And to explain that in detail, think about a drummer, somebody playing the drums. You've got 4 appendages, 2 feet, 2 hands, and each one of them is doing their own thing. I mean, you can't do that mechanically. You can't sit there and think about it. Your body has to be trained for that action. It's just, think about driving your car. You're not telling yourself. This is when you start learning about expedited shipping. There's basically 3 ways to be an expediter. The cheapest way and the easiest way to do it is to find a company. Their expediting companies are everywhere, and call them and tell them you want to be a fleet driver. A fleet driver means there is a person that owns 1, 2, or 10 vehicles, and you basically drive their vehicle for them, and then they work out a deal where you split the money from the load, like 35-65 or 60-40 or whatever it is, and it's their vehicle, their insurance, their wear and tear, but you're driving it, so they're making their money off of you driving, but you're making money the same. That's being a fleet driver. It doesn't cost you anything to be a fleet driver. The second way to get into expediting, which is what I'm doing, is I own my own van, and I signed on with a company, and they do my dispatching. They find my loads because they're connected, and they also pay there's 2 insurance policies, which drives me batty, but you have 2 commercial insurance policies. One is when the van is empty, and one is when the van's loaded, just to keep it complicated. The loaded is way more expensive, so I pay for my empty insurance, which isn't bad, and the company that dispatches me pays for the loaded insurance. But they find the loads and they take a percentage of the load. And the final way, which is the Viking way, is you have your own van, you operate under your own authority, and you pay all your own insurances, and you find your own loads. Can it be done? Yeah, but you're driving down the road. How do you look for cargo against somebody who's sitting behind a desk? And I've seen this. They literally have 6 computer screens looking back at them. It's got, that's watching for stuff. You can't really compete against them. And I have a friend of mine out here that ran under his own authority, paid his own insurance and everything. And something I never thought about is this company I'm driving for, I get paid on Friday like clockwork. If you're an independent driver and you go do a load and you're just one person, that company that owes you money suddenly isn't in a big hurry to pay you. And this friend of mine who dropped his authority and signed on with the same company I'm on with was telling me about that. He said, this company's owed me $2,000 for the last month and they haven't quite gotten around, and I have no money and I can't go on the road and drive because I don't have any money to pay for gas. See what I mean? You get caught in this crossfire. So running as an independent little guy on your own authority is really bad, I'm finding out. So sign on as an expediter just by having a good driving record and the willingness to come out here and do this. And there's companies will hire you. When I went through my little orientation at this company, there were 5 people in the room, and 4 of them were fleet drivers. I was the only guy that owned my own van. So, no. This is my van. Maintenance. I bought the van. The maintenance is on me. The gas is on me. But I get paid either by the mile or a flat rate for every load. And I sat down and figured out with my cost of operation, how much does it cost per mile to drive this thing? And the rates float around. About the lowest you get paid that I've seen is about 80 cents a mile to $1-ish per mile. This is as an owner-operator with a dispatch company. And then you have short runs. They don't pay you by the mile, they pay you by the load. They'll say, okay, you're going to go 80 miles with this. We'll give you $175. They'll just give you a flat number. And they call those turd loads. They don't bother me. But I've done, the best load I ever got was Niagara Falls to Los Angeles, and it was 2,500 miles, and I got paid $2,700 to drive to LA. And I really enjoyed it going cross country. Really enjoyed it. But that's it for the expediting part. But yeah, if you had the specific questions, and there's a few big companies for this type of work. If you're going to sign on with a company, I recommend a bigger company because they're connected. These dispatchers have a network of friends and clients and whatnot, and they can dip into that pool to find stuff for you. This company that I work for recently bought out another company in North Carolina. I think this one's out of Toledo, Ohio. They bought out a company down there now. So we have 2 offices. And I was down in the Carolinas the other day, and I called and I said, okay, I'm back on the board. Is there anything going on? And she said, I'll tell you what, I got calls coming in all over the place. Give me a minute, I'll give you a call. And I said, all right. I hung up, and it was like this. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. The phone rang. She had a load, within 2.5, 3 seconds. She sent me from the Carolinas to New Jersey, and then they almost immediately got me out of New Jersey going back west. It was fast. But I think that using the connections of a company is going to be more effective than you trying to drive and trying to watch the load boards, which you have to pay a few $100s a month to be on the load board. So there's another expense and stuff. So yeah, just having your own vehicle and signing on is the way to go. But before you do that, go be a fleet driver, because there are people that come out here with all this full of piss and vinegar. I'm going to expedite, I'm going to do this, and they find out they don't like doing this. They don't like being on the road. They don't like the job. The example of that was, I did this for a while back when COVID happened and everything shut down. I was flying helicopter tours up at the Grand Canyon in 21 when the COVID garbage kicked off, and it shut everything down. So I got into expediting for a little over a year, and I learned the system back then. Now I'm back because I'm retired from aviation. When I got back into it, I kind of went on YouTube and I was just playing around, and I found a guy, he was in his early 20s, and he decided he wanted to be an expediter, which is cool, and he dropped some bank, and he bought one of those Mercedes Sprinter vans, those super duper expensive, very long, bought it new, spent $75,000, $80,000 on a brand new van. He had it outfitted with all kinds of equipment, a TV mounted, and a fridge, and a microwave, and a fold-down bunk, and everything but a disco ball. And he made all kinds of videos about his build, and then he started driving. This guy's like 22, 23 years old. He starts driving, then he starts posting videos. You do this, you do that, blah, 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 blah. 3 weeks later, he makes a video. I don't really like being out here on the road. I'm going to stop doing this, and I'm going to sell the van. So the guy's upside down in this van. So if you haven't actually lived out here on the road and done this kind of work, it's probably to your advantage to drive somebody else's to make sure you want to do this and kind of learn the system. And I put out videos back 3-4 years ago, little training. If you go back into my playlist, look under expediting, it talks about the little bits and pieces of things you learn, what the do's and the don't do's, and the what to look for. It's all in there, for expediting. But bouncing back on topic about hi, how are you? Hey, Universal, you're back. So if you think about somebody playing the drums, how long does it take to learn how to play the drums? Because again, you can't play the drums. How's my new DP? Oh, what's that part? Your new DP. What's the DP part mean? And like when you're driving a car, you're not thinking about gas, brake, shifter, clutch if you have that, and turn signal. You're not thinking about that. Your brain, noisemaker. Your brain is, what's for dinner tonight, and what was that girl in 8th grade's name with the funny hair? Whoa, windy. So you can't mechanically play the drums. So how long does it take to train someone to have all 4 of their appendages doing their own thing? Quite a while. But imagine if you had 4 people, and you had to train each one to do one of the parts. Like one guy was just the bass with his foot, and then another person did the other, whatever the other drums. I don't know what they call stuff. And you train each person to do one part. All 4 of them together. Carpenter, restoration carpenter. Hey, cool. What's up? If you trained 4 different people to play one drum set, within a few minutes you could probably play music with them because they each understood their part. That's how assembly lines work. You teach a person to do one specific task, and that's what they do repeatedly as the assembly line goes by. All you're doing, wow, again. Try to see where this guy is. He's not behind me. I'm not speeding by any stretch of the imagination. It's 70 and I'm doing 62. But I like having radar on board. Still don't see him. And in World War II, how the assembly line worked is they got okay, this is ridiculous. They had a handful of workers in these big factories, and one guy's job was just to place all these parts on this belt as it went by. And then it went down, and one person's job was to put these parts, bolt them together, and set them back down. Yeah, it rained. I tell you what, it rained last night. Oh, jeez. I was coming through Indiana. I was getting slapped all over the road, and the big trucks around me started slowing down and flipping on their flashers because there was a crosswind, and those trucks will get knocked over. It trying to figure out where this guy is. When a radar just goes off like that, usually that means they're riding with you. And I don't see anybody behind me. But I was listening to, this morning I was listening to a documentary, and it was talking about the Jeep. And the Army Jeep, they built something like 650,000 of them during World War II. And during the United States invaded North Africa in November of 42, Operation Torch. And the first contact between American and German ground units was in a place called Kasserine Pass. The American Army pretty much got run over because of a multitude of reasons. They were green. Oh, okay, here he comes. He's in the show-off lane coming up behind me in a hurry. So, lack of training, bad tactical doctrine, the fact that they were rookies, and the tanks didn't have service ammunition, they had training ammunition. There he goes. That's also got in the way of success. But they got run over, and in the ensuing battle, and this happens in every war, the Germans captured some American equipment, including the Jeep, and they got the Jeep back to their lines, and they started looking at it, and their first response to the Jeep was to be disparaging of it. They kind of laughed at it and said, "Oh, look at this thing, it's kind of crude, and it's, kind of primitive," and they thought it was funny. And some mechanics looked at it, and they saw it in a different light. And then a car manufacturer, a guy had been a pre-war car manufacturer, he looked at the Jeep and he said, "This is brilliant." And they said, "How is it the German equivalent of a Jeep is called a Kabelwagen." And it was that, you've seen them in the movies, a rear-wheel drive, Volkswagen may have had a 4-cylinder air-cooled engine, only gave out like 25 horsepower, but it worked pretty good. And they said, "Our Kabelwagen is so much of a better piece of equipment." And they said, "It is, but this is a war. This isn't a civilian contest for quality. This is good enough and easy to make." And they said as they looked at it, the engine, they're staring at the vehicle, the body, a Jeep body, those flat fender Jeeps back then, the entire body was made out of a stamp. It was a piece of metal. They pushed the metal into a slot. Hold on here a second. Let me see what this guy's doing. Hold on. Gotta make a radio call. Hold on. Sorry. That's when workers are present. And eastbound, we got Highway Patrol just set up in that construction zone, marker 24. Look out. All right. Had to make a radio call. The entire body was made from a stamp. They put this metal into this mold and they went bang, there, Jeep body. Whereas the Germans assembled their vehicles with bits and pieces and parts and made it very precise. Well, this was just a stamped out part. Pretty simplistic. When you open the hood, and I didn't know this, when you open the hood, you have like a manual that shows you some pretty basic stuff like how much oil, what type of oil does it hold, the spark plug firing order, how the belt goes on, the serpentine belt with the alternator and the starter. And it was stamped under the hood. They stamped it into the metal, so it was always there. You didn't have to go looking for it. I thought, wow. And they said the vehicles are built by engineers, but they don't think about the people who have to work on them. They think about what they're doing. Well, this vehicle, the Jeep, was so simplistic that made it where you could work on it. You could physically get to it to work on it. And then one of the designers noticed there was only like 2 sizes of bolts. The entire engine could be taken apart with 2 wrenches as opposed to 30, because all the components on the German vehicle were different sizes. And then they found in the glove box on the Jeep, they found a wrench that was 2 different sizes on either end. So it literally came with a double-ended wrench that you could take the whole vehicle apart. They said that's a brilliant design. The engine was super simple. and it had leaf spring suspension, which is super simple and kind of primitive. And they realized that the assembly line of hurry up and build it, and then the design of the vehicle was so simplistic that they could knock these things out and make them like sausages, as the Soviets used to say. Whereas the German vehicle had a team of people who built it, and it was very precise, and it had very sophisticated suspension, and they would check for tolerances and make sure everything was super tight, which is good in peacetime. But wars consume things, vehicles, fuel, people. It consumes things. So why spend all this time, money, and energy building something that's probably not going to be around that long? So make something good enough and quick enough and fast enough that if it gets blown up, you can fix it. And another problem the Germans ran into is they were using most of their vehicles were from 1930s designs, which were not exactly reliable. And they had British vehicles in their military, and French, and Belgian, and German. They had all these different vehicles that required different parts, and different styles, and they weren't designed for the job you were doing. And later, as time went on, the Germans figured out that the Jeep, the half-track, and the deuce-and-a-half truck, a big chunk of the parts were interchangeable. Which right there saves problems. You have the same alternator in all the vehicles. You have the same carburetors in all the vehicles. You have the same spark plugs in all the vehicles. It was standardized, which again helps the supply and helps for simplicity. And they were surprised by how, not a bad idea to make everything the same, just the standardization. And the assembly line process was adapted after the war. If you go to Germany today and go to, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Volkswagen, go into their plants. They run an assembly line. They quickly figured that out, and they now follow the same style of production that Henry Ford invented. And when I was playing Army back in the day, I had a guy I was with, I used to be in the Army with, let's see here, howdy do, 7661, howdy. We are on Interstate 94, eastbound in Michigan, heading to the town of Romulus, just outside of Detroit, with a 30-pound box with some kind of bolts in it, in case you're wondering. And it's been threatening rain here for a while. A guy that I was serving in the Army with, and back in the 80s, the mark and the U.S. dollar, the exchange rate in the mid-80s got to be crazy, where the U.S. dollar was worth a dump truck load of money. I don't know what was going on. So what everybody did was they bought a Mercedes, take their U.S. dollar that translates into the German mark, which I guess that doesn't exist anymore. It's now the euro, but the exchange rate was so favorable, the enlisted soldiers were buying Mercedes, new from the factory. And what's funny is back then, whereas not like today, but now you go to a car dealer and you buy a car. Well, in Germany, you order the car and then they measure you. They measure your reach, your sitting height. They get the tape measure out. They literally measure your dimensions, and they build the car to fit you. And then when you get the car, and I've seen these, and if you ever get an older Mercedes, take a look at that. There's a plaque on the dashboard that says, this car was made for fill in the blank, whoever the person was. And so he had that plaque on his dash, and I went, what's that all about? And he explained it to me, and he goes, and then they invite you to the factory during the final stages of assembly, and they get you on a catwalk that goes over the assembly line, and they point and they go, you see that car right there? And they go, yeah, that's yours. It's being built for you. And he said it's kind of a neat experience to watch your car come down the assembly line. And then it comes out and they do all the tests and checks and they hand it to you right from the factory. I'm like, dude, that is kind of cool. Oh, still getting blown around. But the whole assembly line process, and again, this is contradicted the way the Germans thought about production. And I was listening to an audiobook, and there were some POWs, and I don't know where they were, but they were on a hillside. They were here in the States somewhere. They were on a hillside, and there was a big factory across the way, and there was one door on the side of it, like a roll door for like a one-car garage. A tank drove out this door and drove into this giant parking lot and stopped, and the guy got out and he walked back in. And he came out in another tank and he parked next to it and he went back in. And he came out in another tank and he parked it. And the parking lot started to fill up with vehicles. And one of the soldiers asked the guard, he said, why don't they just leave them in the warehouse? And he said, that's not a warehouse, that's a manufacturing plant. He goes, well, why are they bringing them outside? He goes, because they just finished it. And when they finish a tank, they take it outside. Well, these tanks were coming out as fast as this guy could walk in and get in them. And they said, how fast are they making them? And he goes, I don't know, every few minutes. The completed vehicles, because they had so many lines going. And that's how assembly line was. And I think I've talked about this before, but in Michigan, they had the biggest indoor manufacturing plant in the world at the time. It was called River Run, and they were making the B-24 bomber. And at the peak of think about it, B-24 is a 4-engine bomber. And at the peak of their production, they were pushing a completed plane out the factory door every 63 minutes. I mean, that's insane. But that's how assembly line works. And that's one of the things that cost the war. And, like just the production capacity of the United States. This country put out more equipment than all the other countries in the world combined, simply because we're set up for it. We have the factory, and we have the space, and they had the mindset to do it. And started pushing weapons and equipment all around the world during the war. And the Germans were able, at what point did Germany lose the war? And the general answer was before the first shot was fired. Because like I said, it's like you're picking a fist fight with a waterfall, and all you are is a lit match. I mean, you're not going to beat the waterfall. I'm sorry. But assembly line's been picked up all around the world, and everybody uses it. It's a really efficient way, because you can literally train unskilled. That's how they built ships. They do the same thing with ship manufacturing. The Liberty ships, a bunch of unskilled labor. Everybody had a job to do. And one of the jobs, since I was a kid, a guy was telling me, he worked at a plant in California, and they said there was a train would come in with bits and pieces of the hull, and his job was to pick up the piece off the rail car, pick it up, turn around, and a guy would catch it, and they would set it down upside down, which is how it had to be, and then it would move off somewhere else. And that's what he did, was unload the train, turn around, and spin a 180, turn it upside down, lay it down. And he did that the whole time he worked there. That's all he did. One piece of the process. So today is, I think, the 22nd. I got to be home on the 28th. I got a couple of doctor visits I got to go to. So this time out here is going to be a little shorter than my normal tour. I usually come on about 3 weeks. This is going to be about 2 weeks. Shorter run, but I'll be back out again after that. The heat of the summer is now gone. I'm going to take my air conditioner and my generator out when I go home this next time, so I have a little more space. And I really enjoy sleeping when it's cold. You get tired of that heat after a while. It is currently 51 degrees, and I am still walking around in shorts and a t-shirt because I live in Texas, and that's what we do in Texas. Detroit, 185 miles. Okay, I have one guy in here from England. Where's everybody else from? Out of curiosity. Oh, if you're from overseas, do you see this right in front of the van? The road looks a little different. You see it's like teeth marks. That was a design somebody came up with a few years ago. If you're driving along, right now the road's offset because they're doing construction. But if you're driving down the road and you start nodding off or falling asleep, let me get up here a little bit, I'll show you. And you drift off the road, they made these dents. Hold on, I gotta get an opening. Here we go. Listen to this sound. I think you can hear it right there. That went away. There it is, right there. Can you hear that sound right there? Right. And that's just a dent in the concrete, and they did that to wake you up. If you're nodding off or not paying attention, that sound will wake you up out of a dead sleep. It also vibrates the steering wheel because it's shaking the tire. The rubber. Whoa, crosswind. Does anybody ever hear sneeze so hard you threw your back out? I mean, literally sneeze so violently that your back popped out. I've done that recently, and that was not a good experience. So anyway, I'm going over here to the core. This shows, I gotta stop for gas one more time, but this shows I'm gonna get there about 4 o'clock, so I might not have another load today. I might be the 10th guy on the list, but that doesn't seem to mean anything around here. Within our company, you have a pecking order. It's who's been there or been unloaded the longest. But there's a lot of drivers have restrictions on what they're willing to do. They have the dispatcher knows the dimensions of the vehicle and how much payload you have, because these vans are all different sizes. I'm kind of in the middle size, and there's some drivers that have these weird criteria. Some guys say, I'll only work Monday through Friday. Some guys will go, I don't want to do a load that's more than 100 miles. Other guys say, I'll only drive in these 3 or 4 states, and then you'll have another guy like me that says, I won't go to Florida, because you can get a load to Florida, but you can't get a load out of Florida. And I don't want to get stuck somewhere where I can't get out of. So I learned the hard way, don't go to Florida with cargo. So, like yesterday morning, when I had that load coming out of North Carolina coming back up, I was number 4. Yet I got a call at 6:30 in the morning. How did I get a call at 6:30 if I'm the 4th guy on the list? The other 3 guys got loads? Nope. I'm willing to go. Apparently those were all locals, and they wouldn't drive out of the area. So by default, I got a northbound load, which I am quite happy about. If I'm out here on the road and I'm not at home hanging out with the wifey poo, I just assume be driving every single day. I mean, occasionally you take a day off, for something, but I'm out here to make money. I'm not out here to hang out, look around. I'm willing to go. I've had what they call a pre-planned load, which means it's 8 o'clock in the morning and they say, I have one for you tomorrow morning, for instance. That's a pre-plan. Or it's Saturday and they have one for Monday, so you're not going to be driving for the next day. That's when you go do laundry. That's when I go to the museums. I find the aviation/military museums. Go do that kind of stuff. But as far as just rank and file days, I like to drive. I like to be loaded all the time. Keep the wheels turning. And I keep asking them for a California run, and they haven't gotten me one recently. I like the big cross-country jaunts. Those are my favorite. I got to get out of this lane because I'm having to straddle this. I'm having to straddle that stupid thing and it's not working. All right. Oh, here we go. And yes, the rain has started. All right. Okie dokie. If anything exciting happens, which I don't think it will, I will call you, get back, but I got to make a couple calls. I have a couple of dispatchers that I kind of stick close with, and I'm always harping on these guys to give me a California run. Coming out of Detroit should be doable. So I'll catch up with you guys later, and have a great day. Anything, anyone, anything.